Thank you for watching. Subscribe on Betrayed Man's Diary for more stories. Hey Reddit. My name's Mark. I'm 44 years old, and for more than 2 decades, I thought I understood what commitment meant. My wife, let's call her Karen, is 46. We've been married for 22 years. That's over half my adult life spent with one person. We built a home together. Raised 3 kids. Weathered storms. And somehow, I still ended up blindsided. Our children are everything to me. We have a 20-year-old son, James, who's off at college now. Our 2 daughters, Emily, 15, and Sophie, 11, are still at home. I've always tried to be the steady, supportive father. The guy who shows up. The dad who never misses a recital or a parent-teacher conference. Even through the hardest moments in our marriage, I showed up. And there were hard moments. Back in 2022, our relationship was on the ropes. Things weren't working. There was resentment simmering under the surface, missed connections, the slow, silent distance that creeps into a long marriage when life and routine dull the passion. I asked for a divorce. I moved out. I thought that was it, we were done. But life's rarely that clean. We didn't actually go through with the divorce. Paperwork sat unfinished. Emotions lingered. There was still something between us, some pull neither of us could quite ignore. And so we tried again. We started dating, and I used that word cautiously because it wasn't just casual. It was intentional. For a year and a half, we tried to piece back together what we'd once had. We went to dinners, talked more openly, even took a short weekend trip without the kids. It wasn't perfect, but I was hopeful. Really hopeful. Karen is a licensed psychotherapist, and for years, I admired the work she did. She specializes in dialectical behavior therapy, DBT, a method focused on helping clients manage intense emotions, build healthier relationships, and navigate crises with mindfulness and balance. Ironically, it was her expertise in this area that once made me feel secure in our marriage. I thought, if anyone could understand emotional regulation and communication, it would be her. But now, knowing what I know, that detail feels less like a reassurance and more like a betrayal wrapped in professional irony. About 4 months ago, things began to shift. Again. Karen started to grow distant. Conversations grew shorter. The little gestures, good morning kisses, text check-ins, casual affection, started disappearing. At first, I chalked it up to work stress. She'd recently taken on a few more clients and was juggling more hours. I figured she was burned out. But the signs started stacking up. She became more protective of her phone, something that never used to be an issue. There were late nights where she claimed to be running behind on sessions but couldn't explain where she'd been. She started dressing a little differently, more makeup, new outfits under the guise of feeling better about herself. I wanted to believe it was all innocent. I really did. But when you've been with someone for 22 years, you know their rhythms. You know the way their voice sounds when they're telling the truth and when they're not. I could feel her slipping away again, and this time, it wasn't just emotional drift. It was something more. Something intentional. I tried not to jump to conclusions. I gave her space, even asked if she wanted to talk about anything that might be bothering her. She said she was fine. That everything was just a little overwhelming. That she appreciated me being patient. But my gut kept screaming otherwise. I didn't want to be the guy who snooped. I've always believed in trust and communication over suspicion and spying. But the more things didn't add up, the more I felt like a fool just standing there watching the cracks spread without doing anything about it. And then I found out the truth. For a while, I kept trying to push the doubt aside. I reminded myself we were rebuilding, and rebuilding takes time. Trust doesn't just reappear overnight. I tried to focus on the good moments, the way she still made coffee in the mornings, the way she asked about the kids' schedules, the occasional shared laugh that gave me hope we weren't completely broken. But then there was that night. She had borrowed my Tesla for a few days while her car was in the shop. I didn't think much of it, it wasn't unusual, and I had a work vehicle to use in the meantime. But around 3 a.m. one night, I woke up with a knot in my stomach. Call it intuition. Call it the gut-punching anxiety of a man who's been burned before. I just knew something wasn't right. I reached for my phone, pulled up the app that connects to the car's tracking system, and there it was. She was parked at some random apartment complex I didn't recognize, miles away from our home. At 3 a.m. My stomach dropped. I stared at that little blue dot for a long time, hoping it was a glitch. That maybe she had fallen asleep at a friend's house after a late-night movie. Maybe she had car trouble and didn't want to wake me. Maybe anything other than what it looked like. But I knew. When she came home later that morning, I confronted her. She didn't even seem surprised that I knew where she'd been. She just looked tired. Caught. I asked her what she was doing at an apartment complex in the middle of the night. She hesitated just long enough to confirm my worst fear. Then she said, I was visiting a friend. A friend? At 3 a.m.? At a place you've never mentioned before? It was completely out of character. Karen isn't spontaneous like that. She's meticulous. Predictable. If she was hanging out with a friend, I would have known about it. She would have mentioned their name, maybe even invited me along. I pressed her. Who's this friend? She shifted uncomfortably and said it was someone from work. A new colleague, she said. We were supposed to meet earlier, but things got mixed up. I didn't want to cancel. That's when the red flags turned into air sirens. Her tone was off. Her eyes darted. There was a vague shakiness in her voice that I hadn't heard since the last time she lied to me years ago, back when I found out she had been hiding a friendship with an old flame. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to. But everything in me was screaming that she was feeding me a half-truth. And with someone who's trained in emotional manipulation, someone who teaches clients how to manage truth and boundaries for a living, it's hard to tell where reality ends and rationalization begins. One thing I've always tried to practice in our marriage was trust. Karen and I weren't the jealous type. We'd both had close friends of the opposite sex throughout the years, and it was never an issue. In fact, that level of comfort was something we used to pride ourselves on. It meant our foundation was solid, mature, real. But this time, something was different. Even though I tried to approach the situation with the same open-mindedness we always had, there was a weight in my chest I couldn't ignore. It wasn't just about her having a new male friend. It was the secrecy. The way she danced around my questions. The way she looked like she was always 2 seconds away from saying more but holding back. I asked her again and again who he was. Not to accuse her, not to start a fight, but because I needed to understand. Because I deserved to know who my wife was spending late nights with in unfamiliar neighborhoods. At first, she brushed me off. He's just a friend. Someone new at the office. It's not important. But it was important. And she knew it. After about a week of back and forth, of me pushing gently and her skirting the edges of the truth, she finally gave me his name. Let's call him Chris. She sat me down and said, his name is Chris. He's a client, well, was a client. He came in during one of my group sessions and asked for private guidance after. My heart nearly stopped. A client? She backpedaled fast. Said he wasn't a patient anymore, that it was more of a mentorship thing, that the lines got blurred but she wasn't seeing him professionally anymore. She admitted it looked bad, very bad, and agreed that meeting him outside of work had been inappropriate, even if nothing happened. She swore it was over. That she wouldn't meet him again outside the office. That it had been a lapse in judgment, a moment of poor boundaries in a field where boundaries are everything. That conversation happened in early May 2024. And for a moment, I wanted to believe that was the end of it. But I've learned that sometimes, when someone crosses a line once and doesn't face real consequences, they start to believe it's okay to do it again. Then came June. I wish I could say things improved after that conversation in May, that her promise to distance herself from Chris meant something. But deep down, I knew the story wasn't over. Something inside me, some mix of instinct and emotional bruising, kept whispering that there was more she wasn't telling me. And sure enough, A few weeks later, I got confirmation. It happened by accident, really. I wasn't even checking up on her that night. I just happened to glance at the car location again, out of pure habit, and there it was. The same address. The same apartment complex. Except this time, she didn't just drop by for a short visit. She stayed. Until 6 a.m. That's not just a casual chat. That's not grabbing coffee or processing emotions. That's an overnight stay at another man's home. I waited for her to come back. When she walked through the door later that morning, looking exhausted and slightly disheveled, I didn't explode. I didn't shout. I just asked her where she'd been. She hesitated, then spun the same tired narrative, "He's just a friend. We were hanging out, and I had too much wine. I passed out on the couch. That's all." I stared at her, trying to find a trace of the woman I used to know. The woman who once preached boundaries and emotional integrity to her clients like sacred scripture. But all I saw was a mess of contradictions. Someone caught between her professional ethics and her personal indulgences. I challenged her. "Do you really expect me to believe that? That you got drunk at a former client's place and just accidentally spent the night?" She didn't deny it. She didn't confirm it either. Instead, she folded. Not emotionally, just strategically. She shut down, looked me square in the eyes, and said, "I need space. I need you to leave me alone for a week." A week. As if time and silence could somehow rewrite the facts. It felt like the classic deflection tactic. Not a request for time to reflect, but a way to avoid accountability. A stall tactic. A buffer between the lie and whatever she was going to tell next. I wasn't convinced. I didn't argue. I didn't beg for clarity. I just walked away, knowing the real story was buried beneath layers of rationalization and self-preservation. But what she didn't realize, what she still might not understand, is that every time she asks for space, every time she offers another half-truth, she's not just pushing me away, she's tearing down whatever small amount of trust we had left. That week she asked for space turned out to be anything but quiet for me. While she was off processing or avoiding whatever version of reality she was living in, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was still more to uncover. I wasn't looking for a fight. I wasn't looking to catch her in a lie just for the satisfaction of saying gotcha. I just wanted the truth. So, I started digging. I found Chris's Instagram. It didn't take long. One photo led to another, and suddenly I had a picture of the man who had quietly driven a wedge into my marriage. From there, I found a phone number. His address. I wasn't planning anything dramatic, I just figured if he truly was just a friend, he'd want to clear the air too. So, I reached out. I texted him something calm, something direct. "Hey, this is Mark, Karen's husband. I'd like to talk man to man, just to make sure there are no misunderstandings about what's going on between you two." His response? He called me a little bitch and told me to get lost. That was all I needed to hear. You don't respond like that unless you've got something to hide. That wasn't the response of an innocent man or even a concerned friend. That was the response of someone who knew exactly what he was doing, and didn't care about the destruction it caused. I couldn't let it go. Not yet. So, I drove to his apartment. It wasn't some premeditated showdown. I wasn't looking for a scene. I just wanted to look him in the eye and hear the truth for myself. Maybe, stupidly, I thought there'd be a shred of decency in him. That he'd say, "Yeah, I messed up. I didn't mean to, but I did." Something. Anything. When I knocked, he eventually came down. And immediately got in my face. I mean right in my face, eyes wild, posture aggressive, like he was waiting for an excuse to swing. He launched into a tirade of curses, hurling insults that I won't even repeat here. I stood there, as calm as I could manage, and simply asked, "What's going on with my wife, Chris?" No answer. Just more venom. Then he took out his phone and called the police, all while continuing to hurl abuse. I didn't flinch. I just stood there and waited. But right before he hung up, something snapped. He shoved me. Hard. I stumbled back and hit the ground. Was it assault? Probably. But I wasn't there to start a war. So I got up, dusted myself off, and left. Later that night, I told Karen everything. That I had reached out to him. That I had gone to his place. That I knew something more was going on because no man reacts that violently unless there's something to cover up. That's when she finally came clean, well, sort of. She called it a light affair. Her words, not mine. She said it wasn't physical. That they were just exchanging memes, talking late into the night, sharing jokes and life advice and processing their emotions. She framed it like it was harmless fun. Like I was overreacting. Like I should just let it go. But I was devastated. Because I knew what that kind of connection meant. It's not always about sex. Sometimes, the betrayal cuts deeper when it's emotional. When they're giving someone else the kind of intimacy, laughter, and vulnerability that used to belong to you. But instead of seeing the pain on my face, she doubled down. "You're blowing this out of proportion," she said. And in that moment, I realized she didn't just cheat on me with her body. She cheated with her mind. With her time. With her effort. And maybe worst of all, with her truth. In the months that followed, things took a strange turn. After the truth about Chris came out, or at least her version of it, Karen and I didn't split like I thought we might. We didn't have the big dramatic ending. Instead, we slid into this gray zone of confusing closeness and cautious hope. We kept talking. Spending time together. Trying to figure out if there was still something left worth saving. And weirdly, for a while, it kind of felt like there was. We went to music festivals. We laughed again. We shared meals, inside jokes, even some quiet mornings that reminded me of who we used to be. And yes, we were frequently intimate. There were moments, fleeting, but real, when I felt like maybe, just maybe, we were rebuilding something authentic. But that was the thing about this new version of our relationship, it always felt one-sided. Like I was the one rebuilding while she was just kind of entertaining the idea. And then August rolled around. She decided to buy her own Tesla. It wasn't a surprise, we'd talked about her wanting a car with better mileage and more tech. I helped her pick the model, even went with her to finalize the paperwork. Part of me thought, this is good. This is forward momentum. This is a sign we're investing in each other again. That feeling didn't last long. After she got the keys, we sat together to set up her Tesla app account. It was supposed to be a simple process, link the VIN, sync her phone, adjust settings. I was walking her through it, offering help like I always had. But when we reached the part where she could see her vehicle's location, just like I could see mine, she suddenly went quiet. Dead silent. Her entire energy shifted. I looked over and said casually, "It's cool, right? Being able to track the car, it's come in handy so many times." She barely nodded. Then I said, half joking, "Don't worry, I've got nothing to hide." That's when she looked me in the eyes and said, flatly, "I'd prefer to keep our accounts separate." And there it was. Another red flag, waving high and proud. I asked her why calmly, not accusingly, but she just gave a vague shrug. "I just want some privacy, that's all." Privacy. After everything we'd just gone through, after trying to rebuild trust, after swearing there were no more secrets, she wanted to draw a fresh line in the sand. A line that said, "I want you in my life, but not all the way in. Just close enough to keep the peace, but far enough away that you can't really know what I'm doing." It hit me like a punch to the gut. Because I realized then, I was rebuilding something with someone who was still hiding the blueprint. The very next night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still happening, that despite all the reassurances, all the emotional whiplash, she was still seeing him. I needed to know for sure. Not to catch her in a lie, but because I couldn't live another day drowning in doubt. So I drove over to his apartment complex. And there it was, her brand new Tesla, parked right outside. That sinking feeling in my stomach returned full force. My heart was pounding, but not from anger. It was that hollow, numb dread you feel when you already know the truth but still hold on to a sliver of hope that maybe, just maybe, you're wrong. I texted her. I texted both of them. Told her I was outside. Asked her to come out. Just talk to me, face to face. Be honest. Own it. She refused. She didn't even reply. No explanation. No denial. Just radio silence, as if ignoring me would make it all disappear. I drove home in a fog. When I got back to the house, the weight of it all just settled over me like wet concrete. I couldn't sleep. Couldn't eat. My mind was racing with every worst-case scenario, every image I didn't want to imagine but couldn't stop picturing. And then, for reasons I can't fully explain, maybe desperation, maybe instinct, I went into her room. I know it was a breach of privacy. I'm not proud of it. But after everything we'd been through, I needed answers. I needed truth. That's when I saw it. Sitting out on her work table, right next to her laptop and her stack of psychology books, was a leather-bound journal. It wasn't hidden. It wasn't locked. It was just there. As if some part of her wanted to be found out. I hesitated. Then I opened it. What I read shattered what little was left of the image I had of my wife. It wasn't just emotional support. It wasn't just meme sharing or heart-to-hearts. This guy, Chris, wasn't even just a fling. He was one of her clients. A DBT client, no less, a man diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. Someone extremely vulnerable. Someone she was supposed to help, to guide, to protect within clear therapeutic boundaries. Instead, she crossed every line imaginable. Page after page, she documented extended therapy sessions that went far beyond anything professionally appropriate. 4, 5, even 6 hours long. In those entries, she described physical contact, kissing, dry humping. She detailed conversations that veered into explicit sexual territory. Discussions about fantasies, about his body, about their bodies. But worse than that, she wasn't just acting out of impulse. She knew what she was doing. She wrote about the emotional weight of it all. The guilt. The shame. The thrill. She fantasized about building a life with him, leaving everything behind to pursue this forbidden, dangerous connection. And yet, despite recognizing that she was risking her marriage, her children, her career, she couldn't stop herself. She chose not to. In that moment, everything clicked. Every lie. Every vague answer. Every distant look, every night she asked for space. It was all there, in her own handwriting, proof that this wasn't just some momentary lapse. It was a sustained, conscious betrayal of me, of our family, and of the very profession she built her life around. She didn't just cheat on me. She violated everything she claimed to stand for. And the worst part? She seemed okay with it. She came home just after midnight. I was waiting for her, sitting at the kitchen table with the journal open in front of me. I didn't yell. I didn't throw accusations. I just asked her, why? She saw the journal, and her face turned pale. Everything drained out of her in an instant, the defiance, the emotional distance, even the cool professionalism she always wore like armor. She broke down. Full-on collapsed into tears, stumbling over her own apologies. She didn't deny any of it. Instead, she started begging. Not for forgiveness. Not for another chance. She begged me not to report her. She said, please don't ruin my career. I've worked so hard to build it. Don't take that away from me. As if I was the one tearing it down. She kept repeating it, please don't tell the board. Please. I can't lose my license. It was a surreal moment. For months, I'd been the one drowning in guilt, in heartbreak, in endless spirals of what did I do wrong? And now, here she was, terrified, but not of losing me, not of losing her family. She was terrified of losing her title. Her reputation. It was like a punch to the chest. Around 2 a.m., I couldn't take anymore. I walked out, got in my car, and just drove aimlessly through the quiet streets until sunrise. I didn't even know where I was going, just away. The air was cold and empty, and so was I. That morning, I called my own therapist. I hadn't seen him in a few months, but I needed help. I couldn't carry this by myself anymore. I explained everything, what I'd found, what she'd admitted, what she was begging me not to do. And that's when I learned something I hadn't realized. All licensed therapists are mandatory reporters when it comes to ethical violations. Even when it's a colleague. Even when it's personal. Without hesitation, my therapist said he would have to report her to the Board of Behavioral Health. It was out of my hands now. And as much as I wanted to feel relief, I didn't. Not really. There was no victory in this. Just sadness. Just the slow realization that the woman I married wasn't coming back and maybe hadn't been there for a long time. Not long after that early morning session with my therapist, the formal process kicked into motion. An investigation was launched. It didn't take long before I was contacted by the State Attorney General's office. They requested a sworn statement from me, asking about Karen, the nature of her relationship with Chris, and what I had discovered in the journal. It felt surreal. One day you're married to someone you trust, and the next, you're sitting across from an investigator giving legal testimony about that same person's professional misconduct. When they asked for evidence, photos, screenshots, specifics, I paused. I didn't want to be vindictive. That was never my goal. As much as I hurt, I didn't want to be the guy who burned down her career in a fit of rage. So I told them the truth, but vaguely. I confirmed what I had seen but made it clear I wouldn't turn over the journal or its contents unless subpoenaed. I figured if she was going to face consequences, they should come from her actions, not from my hands. Surprisingly, I convinced her to self-report. After some tense, tearful conversations, she agreed to go to the Board of Behavioral Health and disclose what had happened. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was damage control. Either way, she admitted to crossing a line with a former client. The investigation is still ongoing. I assume they're auditing her case notes, pulling client files, conducting interviews. But I've been left in the dark. Until the final report is made public, I have no idea what's going on behind those closed doors or what consequences may come. What I do know is this: our marriage is officially over. We're deep into the divorce process now, untangling 2 decades of shared life, shared property, shared parenting. It's brutal and sterile and necessary. There's no reconciliation coming. No half-hearted promises or second chances. Just paperwork and reality. And then, because betrayal rarely ends cleanly, she retaliated. She filed a harassment restraining order against me. The grounds? She claimed I stole her journal. That I flooded her phone with messages asking why she did what she did. She painted a picture of a desperate, vengeful husband. But in reality, I was just a man trying to understand why the woman he built a life with had chosen to burn it all down. The court granted the order, temporarily. And still, after all that, I can't shake this gut feeling that she's still seeing him. I don't go looking for it. But every now and then, I check her car's location. I don't even mean to muscle memory, maybe. Trauma. Instinct. And every single time I check, her car is there. Parked outside his apartment. Late at night. Early in the morning. Still. After everything, after the journal, the investigation, the divorce, the restraining order, she's still going back to him. She's still choosing him. She's still risking everything: her career, her license, her reputation, her daughter's respect, her entire identity as a caregiver and professional. And for what? I may never get that answer. But what I do know is this: I'm done trying to make sense of someone who no longer makes sense. She can't be saved from herself. All I can do now is save myself and my kids from the wreckage she leaves behind. As for me, well, I'm doing my best to pick up the pieces. Some days are better than others. Some mornings I wake up with a little more strength, a little more clarity. Other days I feel like I'm still standing in the ashes, trying to remember what my life looked like before it all went up in flames. But I'm trying. I've been focusing on healing, one day at a time. I'm seeing my therapist regularly now, keeping my sessions consistent. I stay steady on my medications, even when it feels like they're barely holding the edges of me together. I've learned the hard way that healing isn't linear, it's a jagged, uneven path. Some days feel like progress, others like complete collapse. And truthfully, I still feel lost. I replay moments in my mind like scratched records, wondering if there was something I missed. If there was a version of this story where I could have done something, anything, to stop it from unraveling the way it did. But the answer, more often than not, is no. This wasn't just about me. It wasn't about a broken marriage. It was about someone who chose repeatedly to betray not just me, but everything she claimed to believe in. Processing all of this has been incredibly hard. Some of the hardest emotional work I've ever had to do. Which is why I decided to write it all out here. At first, it was just about documenting the facts, getting the timeline straight. But somewhere along the way, this became more than that. It became a release valve, a place to pour out the pain, confusion, anger, and grief in a way that didn't leave me choking on it. And surprisingly, writing it down helped. Even just a little. So, if you made it this far, thank you. Thank you for reading. For listening. For bearing witness to a story I never imagined would be mine to tell. And thank you, in advance, for any words of kindness or support you might offer. It doesn't fix everything. But it reminds me that I'm not alone. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more dramatic tales.